We bumped Penny from the table.
Don't quote me on that.
I think he's okay with it. There was something like a bad Penny. Is he a bad Penny tonight? It's good. He's probably since he was a kid.
What have you been up to? Wow, really?
He's getting very close to running late. He's got another minute to run in. Because he doesn't have any excuse.
Kelly's going to Connecticut in July sometime for
Can't walk in the rain.
family get-together.
There's Dan.
He's got an uncle and aunt, an uncle.
Okay.
that lives out there. No, I'm not sure. Honestly, I've never been.
I always go online every once in a while. I printed it myself. Oh, yeah, I know. I always think that when I get here.
Oh, God.
That's what mine is right.
Oh, good.
She has a dinner and she's the speaker, so.
Open some.
Trees. Nice. I think Kelly's relatives
Not
are
that
somewhere in Hartford, which I guess is what, somewhere in the center of the state.
We have 4 bullet points. First one will take about 5 minutes.
How are you? You know, I'm good.
I assume you don't drive, it's like driving from here to the Springs or something.
Planning or emergency takeoff.
One meeting and I understood about 10% of it. It's really, it's very high level stuff. It's, yeah, it's
Sure, that makes
interesting,
sense.
but
I can see that.
I need to get more immersed. We're having a retreat in, I think September, like a 3-day thing, so that'll be a lot more education. But it's, you know what, there's a lot of stuff out there. So,
We got counties taking
Really,
some
how
of
cool
those
to get to see that.
yeah, it is kind of cool.
And all emergency management, or is it just?
It's primarily, rail that they're focused on. Transportation, rail and highway.
Good evening, everyone.
Well, from Pennsylvania like that.
Okay, we're going to start with some introductions around the table, and since we have some new faces and you have some new faces and all of that, although Randy would be the one that probably from the council that would most benefit, as he just shows up, so that's so that'll be good. And so I'm Phil Cernanek, and I'm the mayor.
Hi, I'm Bruce Beckman. I'm a council member at large.
I'm Bruce Tallman, council member at large, and I went to the dentist today.
I went to the dentist today.
I'm Catherine McMurray, representing District 4, the Baptist District.
I'm Sharon Garr, and I don't know my district number, but I know Mayor Saranac is part of my community.
District 3.
Okay,
And
thank
make sure
you.
and tell them how many years you've been on the board. 4 years.
I've been on for 2 months.
I'm Greg LaRock, I'm in District 2, and this is my first term, but my third year. I do have to go to the dentist next week.
Hi, I'm Chuck Reed. This is the beginning of my 6th year on the board, and I live in District 3.
And I'm going to
We're
forward it to
introducing
them.
ourselves.
I'm Pam Grove, and this is what, my 3rd or 4th year on the board? 3rd, thank you.
And I'm Margie Clute, and I'm in District 3. And I've been on the board for 7 years.
My name's Paul Kastner. I'm in District, or live in District 1, and I've been on board for 4 years.
I'm Dan Miller, I'm in District 1, and I've been on the board for 3 years.
Debbie Brinkman, City Council.
Randy Stein, I'm District 1, where we're sitting, and I apologize for my unforgivable tardiness. I was having coffee with one of our attendees here, and we got to chatting a little bit.
Jerry Valdez, District 2.
Okay, and we have a number of items to have on the agenda today, and I'm going to kind of turn it over to Margie because it's your opportunity from the Historic Preservation Board's perspective to maybe put some agenda items and discussion items in front of us, and believe that the council will not probably be quiet if there's any follow-up questions to make sure we have any level of, the needed level of understanding that we need to have. So, Margie?
Well, first of all, I would say that we really appreciate the opportunity to sit with you and talk, and we expect a lot of discussion, I'm sure, with all the board members. I'm just going to quickly just go over the agenda that we have so you kind of know the topics that we're going to be talking about. One, I'll give you update on trying to increase the members in the historic district. Pam is going to go into more in-depth in the grant program, of which you generously gave us $50,000 again this year, so we'll let you know kind of what's going on with that. Chuck's going to talk about incentives, including the new HB 1311 that was just passed in the state legislature, and how that will help us. Then I'll go over future events and some additional goals that we have going forward. So with that, and then anything else that you guys would like to talk about. First of all, to update our outreach program, just give you a little bit of background, and I think some of it from our last meeting you might be familiar with, but we started out, I think it was an initiative that we developed with one of our past meetings. Maybe, I don't know when that was, but we did a lot of research with the property owners downtown, and Bill Hopping, who was term limited unfortunately, did a lot before his term was out. He did a lot of research with the property owners downtown, both those in the district and those out of the district. And from his information that he got from the property owners, we developed a set of incentives that we came to you, I think it was in May last year, and got approval on some incentives. So we put a package together, put a lot of materials. We took some time to really put some good materials together to get to these property owners, and identified the property owners that were not in the district, and we kind of prioritized who we thought would be the most likely ones that would come in. And then we all took, one or two of these property owners, and we decided to meet with them one-on-one rather than have an event, because we felt it was important to establish relationships one-on-one. And I think this initial round was really to introduce ourselves, introduce the advantages, the obligations and incentives of being in the district. The materials we sent out, we had a cover letter signed by Glenn, kind of introducing what we were doing and saying that we would be following up with a call. We also had the brochure that I think maybe we showed you at our last meeting. We included this brochure about the district. The incentives and obligations, which I'm going to hand out to you, we can go over, because Dennis developed a really nifty one-page matrix. It's real easy to see. And then we also sent an application, because if you remember, all they have to do now is apply and they're in. It's a very, very simple process. So what we did then, and let me just hand this out. This might be a good time to do this. You did a lot of copies, Dennis. Here, I'll just do this because I've got mine. So we can each have one. Do you have one? Because it's kind of different. Everybody, yeah, you guys take them. Does everybody have one?
More than one.
Yeah. As you can see, just how this works, on the left-hand column, we have incentives, and then we have the obligations. You know, they need to understand what their obligations are if they come into the district. The three columns, the first column applies to properties currently not in the district. The middle column is Main Street properties that are currently in. And then the last column are properties that join within the last 12 months. And Pam will go through a lot of, because the advantages to joining the last 12 months are some additional incentives we did under the grant program. But just going through this, and obviously I'm not going to go line by line, but you can see what everybody gets. And then the people that are in the district, both in now and if they opt in. Parking incentives for new uses, which they have a waiver, and that has been a huge, huge thing, important thing to them. So if it's a new use, you know, the parking is waived. If it's a new construction or addition, it's a 50% reduction. So I think that's been a real advantage to have that. Exemption from permit fees, exemption from sales and use tax, exemptions from the lighting code, and flexibility with the building code are all advantages they have. The grant fund, again, Pam will go through. Then under obligations, there is a higher standard of maintenance for structure, exterior, and landscape, which we expect if they are a member of the district. And I think that goes to show, you know, how the property values are really enhanced by being in the district, because the expectations are a little bit higher on their properties. If they are not in the district, or if they are a non-contributing structure in the district, they still follow the Littleton Downtown Design Standards and Guidelines. If they are contributing and in the district, then they follow the Historic Preservation Design Guidelines, which were, if you remember when we did the True Grit workshops that we worked on a couple of years ago, that all flowed from those workshops that we did. And then, of course, the approval of a COA, if they're contributing. So our goal is to try to get the membership in the district up to about 70%. And when we get to that point, we may, when our next meeting, when we're at that percent, we'll talk about a tipping point and maybe how we want to, if there's a tipping point where we can get everybody in the district. So with that said, unless there's questions, I'm going to turn it over to Pam to talk more about the grant fund. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Yes, Mayor.
Council, any questions? Yes. With the, what percentage are we at now?
We are at, I knew you were going to ask that question. I knew somebody was. No, we are at 58%.
Okay.
And it's 58%, and I did it based on owners rather than addresses, different properties, because there's a lot of, there are multiple owners like Cal Murib has, what, 3 properties, so I counted him as one. So we're at 58%. So there's 38 owners total. There are 22 in and 16 out. So to get to 70%, we need 5 more to opt in.
And then one of the comments that has been made over time, and I think we had it there, which is the question of if someone moves into a participant in the district, how that might or might not impact their insurance rates, being a potential cost to the property owner in that regard. Has there been any research on that?
I think does anybody else want to address that? But I think there has been, and I think actually it's a positive to be in the district. Now, I can't say exactly where I heard that, but it's the whole issue of property values, and I think it lends a lot of strength. Do you have anything to add to that, Chuck?
I defer to staff really on that issue.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate just because we have 11 years of history at this point, and so we can talk to individual property owners. And we certainly have not heard that from other property owners. It's been an issue. The only thing that we've ever been concerned about, I think, is if your structure were to be demolished at 49% and you wouldn't demolish it completely, but had to rebuild it, would the cost be higher? And that's possible that it could be higher. We haven't heard that insurance rates have gone up because of that. So, other than that, and I think in checking with other historic districts throughout the state, we've not heard that from anyone else. And when we ask other people that, they kind of stare blankly at us. It just hasn't happened. I've lived in the historic district for 22 years, and it hasn't affected mine at all. I know I'm not business, but it's residents.
The reason I ask that is because I've heard it somewhat from folks that aren't in the district but are in the geography, to say that's a sticking point for them because they don't know or they do know.
I guess all we found is that maybe individual insurance companies, if there's someone who's had a quote from the insurance company that said it would go up, it's the only thing we ever heard. We haven't heard it certainly across the board from insurance companies.
Well, and then I would say is based on the one-on-one conversations that folks may have had, did that come up in any of the conversations?
No, I was just going to mention that. Did it come up in any of your conversations? No, it did not in mine at all. I don't think.
Thank you.
No, I don't think it came up.
Any other questions?
I may be jumping the gun on this, but you mentioned the True Grit training, and I've been on council 3 years, and the whole time I've heard how wonderful that was, but it happened prior to me coming on. So I'm wondering if there is a new opportunity to do something like that, to regenerate ideas and bring people up to speed.
I think that's certainly something we could consider. I think we were very surprised in that we had 90 citizens come to these workshops, and I thought it was just absolutely amazing. And there were property owners, downtown property owners there, plus just citizens of Littleton, and we got great input, and we had a great facilitator. So,
Well, and Bill Hobbing went out and talked to the individual property owners as part of our pre-work for this, as well as us going out, so it's more a one-on-one effort at this point. Not to be considered a workshop in the future, but we are reaching out to the community that way.
Just wanted to throw it out as maybe a planning idea.
So I'm curious the difference in your connection with the property owner versus the person leasing or renting. It would seem to me there might be some differences of interest.
mm-hmm. I would agree. And I met with Russ Hathaway, who owns 4 properties, and, the chocolate therapist down. But I've only talked with him, and maybe that would be a good suggestion to talk with the tenants to see if they could put pressure on their owner. I don't know. Do any of you have any other thoughts about that? That's a good point.
But, because
But it's the owner that has to apply to be in the district.
Well, it may be something to be thinking about if you do talk to them to see what comes of that, because an owner may see some possibilities, a new sign, a new type of sign or whatever, because I know we've seems to me that I attended one of the meetings when somebody wanted a quite different kind of sign. And I don't know if that person owned that property or not, but you guys, I think, allowed it. But those kinds of things might be seen through different eyes with the tenants.
Yeah. Good point. Any other questions?
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about our grant program. And as you know, we have budgeted $50,000. We've had that for the last couple of years. There was a point where it kind of went down to 25, but we're glad to have it back up to 50,000. And this is where we grant funds to property owners or tenants to make improvements to their property. And the things that they can spend the money on are architectural design, and it's listed right here in your benefits, facade work, graffiti removal, maintenance, or signage. Now, we made some changes for this calendar year, and the two changes are, one of them, we wanted to limit the amount of money we could award to a certain type of project. And the reason for that was because last year, we ended up giving an inordinate amount of money to a maintenance project. It was a roof for the creamery. So we thought, let's limit that and get people more chances. The second thing we wanted to do is align with our strategy to get more people to opt into the district. And along with that, we wanted to be sure that we are doing what we could as a board to help fill the vacancy rate. So to that end, we added the option that somebody could use the funds for finishing, for tenant finishing, as long as they had to do with health or safety, something along the lines of accessibility, or to restore some historic feature of the inside of the building. So these were two things that we added this year. We thought about setting aside funds for just those that opted in this year, and we decided that that really wasn't the best thing to do because we may have too many applicants and not enough money. It would be difficult. Also, it really wasn't fair to the people already in the district. They needed to be able to apply for these funds too. So what we did is we gave more points in terms of our criteria for those people that opted into the district within the last year, or those people that had never applied for a grant before. So encouraging those people to apply for the first time and to give an incentive, because this is part of our incentive package that we presented to you. And just so you know a little bit about the process and how it works, is that the applicant puts in an application to staff, and there's a deadline, and it is reviewed by staff and then brought to us on the board. It is required that the applicant come to the meeting and answer any questions that we may have, and then we make a determination based on our criteria about how much to award to each individual. Once that amount is awarded to them, then they have a certain amount of time in order to finish the work. Once they finish the work, then we look at what information, we look at all the receipts and make sure it was done up to standard and they abided by our agreement, and then we pay them, we reimburse them, so to speak. And they do have to come to us with 3 bids, so they just can't get their brother-in-law or something to give us a bid and we give them the money. So that's the process that we go through. This year, we have 7 applications, and for $120,000. So we will probably not give everybody the total amount they want. And they only receive 80%, so it's a co-sponsorship. We don't fund it at 100% of their project. We only fund at 80%. So it's alive and well. We normally would have 2 rounds if we didn't get enough applicants, but this year we'll probably run out after the first round, which we will make our determination at our next meeting. Questions?
Yes, first.
I just thought the architectural design assistance benefit was a really good idea. Couple questions, I guess. Whoever the architect is has to have a level of expertise with respect to historic preservation, so who is providing those services, and have you seen many of the property owners take advantage of that particular opportunity?
Yeah, we only have one for facade work this time, the rest is maintenance. And last year, 3 were maintenance and 1 were signage. So it tends to be more maintenance kinds of things.
Okay.
Right now, I mean, who knows going forward?
Assistance 2 years ago?
Pardon?
2 years ago for,
Oh, okay, okay. Which architects are,
I don't remember who the architect was.
is it somebody local?
Yes, it was.
Oh, okay, okay.
Peggy?
So do you consider the possibility that a particular building might be have a greater impact if its project were done? I don't want to name names, but I'm thinking a very high visibility one that probably is applying, if not this year, next year, or maybe last year for all I know. And maybe it's a 2-step thing. So I just thought, and this is nonprofit, so I'm wondering if you're considering something like that.
According to our criteria, that's really not one of the criterias. So, I mean,
Well, I know you got the criteria. I'm just wondering whether or not this is something I mean, I know about those. I've just wondered if this is something you think perhaps should be an option, or maybe it's so rare that you wouldn't need to do it.
well, I don't know if anybody else wants to answer, but it's kind of subjective. And one thing we've learned is that it really helps to have a criteria and stick to the criteria. And if that's something we want to think about in the future, I think that's maybe something we might want to consider. But we wouldn't want to have an applicant come back to us and say, well, but you didn't follow your criteria, and this is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I wasn't thinking that you would deviate, only that you might think about whether to add something.
That's a good idea to add going forward, I think. I don't know what the rest of the group thinks.
Well, and certainly that architectural fabric of the entire district is very important, and will no doubt be talked about during the discussion with the grant considerations.
Thank you.
I have I need to get a little clarification, then maybe a comment. You mentioned that one of your grant criteria now would be an interior adjustment of some kind if it met an historical requirement. Can you talk about that, and how long have we been including that as a grant option?
We just did it in this round this year, and it was a way for us to help the tenants and encourage them maybe with the finishing options and to make it more of an historical character. But on the health and safety side, if they needed to do something like accessibility, like handicap accessibility or asbestos, something like that, to help alleviate some of the cost of attracting a tenant.
It's probably a really good idea because it involves the tenant rather than the owner, and the inside issues are the tenant issues, and now you get somebody who has some ownership into the program that might otherwise have thought otherwise. But my comment is, it's entirely possible this opens up a whole new range of applicants who've already done facades and now want to, take another bite because even as an owner, and they see some opportunity here. And I'm thinking the 50,000, if my thought process is correct, that 50,000 in your situation today with $120,000 worth of requests could become more often the case rather than the exception. Any
It could
thoughts
be,
on
and
it?
we could maybe come back to council and ask for more in the
Yeah, I
budget
don't-
next
I
go
don't know if I'm
around.
going there.
Next year we'll ask.
But the whole point is this, is to get ownership and incentives. And I'm just thinking that's kind of a new wrinkle, that it's going to have some impact, that I'm trying to think how that,
Well,
initially, it's very good, but I'm
yeah.
wondering if you might ace out somebody who wanted a facade, because now somebody gets a second bite at the interior. I mean, it's a whole new issue for you.
It's all part of our incentive package, and if a property owner that has a vacant building could get a tenant in that much earlier, it's better for the community as well as that individual owner. They get rent faster.
It's absolutely win-win, but I just am seeing I'm just seeing the challenge.
Yeah.
I could just add, and, it hasn't been tested yet, you're right. We won't know until we work it out and see what happens. But I think that we also liked it for the purpose of that there are many buildings that have architectural features interior that are really valuable and we want them to be saved also, especially if they're in the storefront or behind the storefront. We saw this as not only an incentive, but also an extension of preserving some of the past that have features that are worthwhile preserving. Right, we haven't tested it out, and then you year or two before we really know if there is enough money and we'll.
We might be just a victim of our own success in a way, which is good. I mean,
Good point.
You mentioned the maintenance programs again, and I wondered, if somebody's doing maintenance, again, a lot of this has to do with historic fabric of the exterior that's being maintained. So again, are there people that you're able to direct them to who have the requisite expertise to do this kind of work versus just any general contractor?
That's kind of,
Typically haven't been.
no, it's kind of beyond our preview, but
Oh,
there
is that-
are good historical architects, like one that served on the board, Kevin. He's one that's been,
I meant like the maintenance companies, there's,
Subcontractors.
yeah, there's people that actually do work
Like
as something of a
windows, for
specialty.
instance,
Yeah, and I wondered if you guys had a list, so if somebody wants to do a maintenance project, there's likely to get a project done that's got more, I don't know, historic content to it, if you get somebody who knows how to do that, as opposed to, two guys in a truck kind of thing.
We haven't done, Historic Denver has a list for the
Yeah.
metro area, and we encourage basically the property owners to talk to each other. We're uncomfortable as staff recommending someone.
Well, not necessarily recommending, but even if you had Denver's list, it might be good to just have a list of everyone you're aware of that does that kind of work, just to encourage
Yeah, it's a good
more of
idea.
it, so.
And we do, by the way, have 3 architects on the board, Greg and Paul and Dan.
Right.
So, which is good, and I'm sure you guys could recommend somebody if we had a request for that too.
When those projects are submitted, for instance, we had one maintenance project was a roofing of a entry canopy. And the details they were submitting weren't real sensitive to the building, and we made recommendations. For instance, the cap flashing came up over and down over the cornice. So, we made recommendations on how to minimize that, to not impact the historic nature of the building. And that particular owner was very open to that.
Good, yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember things like windows, I mean, windows are a lot more complicated than the layman might think, just from my recollection.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple local companies that do historic profile windows, and we've
Right.
as an architect, I've used them on other projects in Denver.
Yeah.
And have made suggestions of companies to take a look at.
Okay, great.
Not a strong recommendation, just say, hey, take a look at this.
Yeah, you can't force somebody, I suppose, but.
Correct.
Yeah, but it's good to provide, as you say, a list, if you're looking for somebody who knows what they're doing, these guys do, and if you want to use someone else, okay, fine, but so forth and so on. Thanks.
Gary?
I have a question on the properties that are on, what is that? I guess it'd be east of Prince, on the south side of Maine. Are they historic as well? Right as you come in from the
Are
east
they in the district?
to
Are you
the
asking?
left, those are not historic, is that correct?
The Main Street Historic District is only along Main Street, and it kind of wraps around Alamo just on the west end.
Right, and I'm talking
So
on
we're
Main
not
Street.
going down Prince.
We have some individual structures
Yeah.
on Prince,
No, I'm talking on Main Street.
on Main Street.
Right
Oh,
as you
on
come
Main
into
Street.
Main Street, right as you come into Main
Yeah,
Street on the
between Vega
south
Park
side.
and
Oh,
Prince.
they are not.
Oh, I'm
no.
sorry.
The park
Yeah.
is, but the first block is not.
The first north is not, so do they,
On the south side.
Main Street Apartments is in the opt-in district, however, so is the little building in the middle. But they're not
so
in
then
the-
as far as those buildings then, Dennis, are they don't qualify then for,
They actually do qualify because they're in the opt-in district. So
just
if
because
they
they're in
were-
the district?
If they were to opt in, they actually could qualify for.
So as
grant
long as they stay a
program.
historical type looking thing?
Right, they'd be considered non-contributing probably, but,
Okay, all right, cool, thanks.
Do you need an explanation of contributing and non-contributing?
No, thank you.
no, that's correct.
Unless you'd like to hear it.
No, I know, so. Check?
I'd just like to go back to the conversation a moment ago. There's been some change in our operations over the last couple of years as previously, a lot of times the architects were called in to consult with various people that had submitted certificate of appropriateness. And I think just fairly recently, the staff has gone through a process where they selected a consulting firm or interviewed consulting firms to play that role. And I don't know if that helps to answer, Bruce, some of the questions that you were asking about some of those expert points that allows us then to really just sit in more of that policy role.
Yeah, no, exactly. I recall that there was conflict, it's like philosophical conflict in terms of the board doing both, or people on the board doing both. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Anything else? We have a brochure, and I'll pass this out to you with an application so you can look at more detail at your leisure.
Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
With that, we'll turn it over to Chuck.
As those work their way around the table, just a quick update on the incentives. As we've discussed over the last year, we've retooled the incentives program based on the conversation with council last year. And last year, we also asked if council would consider expanding the incentive to include potential of a sales tax rebate. And the staff recently came back to the Historic Preservation Board and reported that sales tax incentive really is probably not something that's going to work downtown for a number of different reasons. And so there's a little bit of information that's being passed out about that. Earlier this year, and Margie referenced this, the Colorado legislature adopted House Bill 1311. And 1311 is a very intriguing piece of legislation that provides incentives through individual income tax credits for projects that are done in a historic district. And $5 million in state funds were allocated annually over the next 5 years for this program. The program is called the Colorado Job Creation and Main Street Revitalization Program. And job creation and Main Street revitalization, we really feel tailors well with a lot of the incentive and economic development programs that this council has been very assertive in pursuing. And we would like for the city to really consider an expansion of an existing incentive. Currently, residential properties that are historic landmarks are eligible for a property tax rebate. 50% of that property tax that's paid to Littleton. Their properties in the Main Street Historic District are not eligible for that incentive. And while the Colorado Job Creation and Main Street Revitalization Act is in place, so over the next 5 years, we'd like for the council to consider an expansion of that property tax incentive to the Main Street Historic District. This could be designated either for everybody who's in the historic district to allow, again, reinvestment into their properties, or it could be targeted just to the individuals that are not in the district as an incentive to join. Again, Littleton has an opt-in district. It's about the only opt-in district in the state, and that's been couched as a private property rights issue, and as, again, we keep moving towards that critical mass, we think that it's important that everybody's really playing on the same field.
Chuck, explain again, why is it not, the properties in the historic district are not eligible for this?
I wasn't around, but my thought was that I think council was trying to, again, level the playing field because there were other incentives going to properties that were in the Main Street Historic District, whereas properties outside that didn't have a lot in terms of incentives. So I think, I'm guessing that the thought was, let's provide something to them. So we do actually offer that property tax rebate to properties outside the district. So if you're in Loudoun Historic District or an individual landmark, you
Okay.
supply that.
I think currently, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if memory serves, that incentive costs the city around $8,000 or $9,000 a year. Not everybody that's eligible for that incentive applies for that incentive. The individual property owners that are eligible need to be proactive about receiving that. I think that the initial estimates by the staff for consideration of this incentive that again really would, as the Historic Preservation Board talked about, again, House Bill 1311 and the Main Street revitalization, we really thought that council's efforts right now towards really taking a very assertive approach towards economic development and Littleton's fiscal health, that it really is a good time to just ask for that expansion of that specific incentive to include the downtown businesses. It's also important that it just remain an incentive. There needs to be a payback to the city for this. Downtown is a very vibrant and healthy location. It is iconic in the metropolitan area. It is a place to go. It is a destination location for people that are visiting from other places. And downtown also, there's a couple of buildings that have been vacant for a while, and we would really encourage additional economic incentives by you to really keep that downtown vibrant. The last page of the handout that just got sent out gives some type of identification of sales tax receipts of restaurants and bars. This is a healthy, vibrant sector of the economy, and our hope is that you would consider expansion of this incentive to really keep the downtown vibrant.
Chuck, I'd have a lot of questions if we were to do that kind of thing, but how would you manage the incentive part is one question. And then, it's not exactly the same thing, but how many of the other folks around the state that are doing historical districts do them as a downtown district or an urban district of some kind and raise money through being a district? And, you know, I'm wondering how
Like through a BID.
Yeah, through a business improvement district or something, yeah, something like that. I'm trying to get a context of how valuable it is. And I know that we don't have all the answers, but I'm just, you know.
There really would be worth looking at. You know, just kind of quickly and off the cuff without research, I know that downtown Golden, which is a very active historic district, is also either a DDA or a BID. There's some, I'm not exactly sure of the structures that they use in downtown Golden. Downtown Arvada, the Arvada Historic District, again, is a BID or a DDA. They may also be a URA. The challenge there, of course, is the timeframe and the cutoff, and that really, in terms of long-term sustainability, there's probably a BID or something other than a URA would be preferred in those locations. Littleton is just so far ahead of the curve of all those other places too, because of the light rail stop. And when you think about other locations and other urban cores, if you hop to Washington DC or you go to Chicago, it's easy to hop to Arlington or to you know, just that next stop that's outside of the downtown area. And Littleton is poised so well for that type of business activity. We'd really like to see you foster that along as you look at your entire economic incentives program.
Just to close out my question, it would really take some strategic thought about what you're going to do with the taxes in the downtown area, because once you pick the path, you're on it.
Well, we're very cognizant too of the fact that, historic preservation is kind of one component of the downtown area, and we really believe that it created again, that fabric that led people to really want to invest downtown. Now that ball's really rolling, and so what else is there? We know that you, as a city, beyond the historic preservation and the grant program, you do a tremendous amount in terms of events, and lighting, and other things that happen downtown. Great to look at a BID or something else to help identify and manage some of those costs.
Well, and typically a BID is one of those things where the property owners themselves are the ones that are putting that together. And that would be one of the things I would, at least personally, I would be looking for is, yes, it is iconic. It is a wonderful place. And what is the collective, to use a terrible term, willing to put forth to ensure that that actually happens as a group. And so that's the part that I would also be looking for is, yes, we've put some catalysts in there, but we have businesses in other areas of the city as well. And so it becomes one of those things about how much does the city invest, not that we haven't, but how much does the city invest in making some of that selection as opposed to the property owners themselves. And I don't know if that came up in any of your, now that you've had those one-on-one conversations, I would just love to put a few other questions in there as you're talking to the property owners.
I'd be happy to give you the list.
I wasn't looking to necessarily go out and do my own. It was, what came up in those conversations that would say, here's some elements, because the city's also investing in other things downtown and certainly beyond the events, and taking a look at that. And so it's one of those things, looking for the partnerships, I suppose.
And I think too, following up with these property owners now that we've made initial contact, I think if there's something new we can talk to them about, I think is good, a reason to call them back.
And with the House Bill 1311, you mentioned a $5 million pool on the state level. Is there something we can be doing with the property owners, or does it have to go through the city, or how to be eligible for some of that pool, and how to deal with that, whether it's at the staff level or with the board level?
I think one, Mayor, first just familiarization for the program, and we've certainly talked about this at Historic Preservation, and I want to make sure that in our involvement, Denise is aware of the program. I'm sure that she is. Anything that Littleton would do would be separate from this program. I just think that the state clearly has made a commitment to downtown revitalization. They see the importance. It seems, again, to us that there was this kind of moment in time where we're looking at overall incentives. Littleton have the opportunity to coattail on the state's efforts here, because when you combine both the 1311 along, again, with a potential of a 5-year expansion of the existing property tax rebate incentive program to the downtown district, that might, again, just be that one extra little tool that would have a property owner say, yes, I want to go ahead and commit to the form and the function of that historic district that just builds that iconic downtown. And you think about what adjacent communities are trying to do in terms of building that downtown structure. We have the privilege of having it. Let's make sure that we're fostering a continued just fiscal health and a strong fiscal engine there.
But I'll ask the question again, because maybe I didn't get through. Is there a grant application or for that $5 million fund?
All through the state. So, David?
But is there, is that something that the property owners do themselves, or, and is it something we can encourage our property owners and have them become aware? Because I would venture to guess there's a smaller part of the property owners that might be following what's the state legislature doing. And I would think
Communication opportunity.
if we have that, and so you're talking about some things to possibly go back to the property owners and talk with them about, I certainly would put that on the list. And as much as you have an application for our grant program,
Great idea, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, great
Yeah.
idea.
And again, it's another reason, it's a reason to call them back with new information. And this was just signed by the governor a couple of weeks ago, just very recent. Anything else for Chuck? Anything else you want to say?
Council? Go.
Just a little bit about events. We are doing the Historic Preservation Awards again this year in conjunction with Historic Littleton, Inc., and they will be held in October, just an FYI, and we'll make sure you all know about it and get invitations. HLI actually plans the event. We don't. We participate and give all of our input and ideas, but it's their event. So we'll certainly let you know when that is, because I think we have some great candidates. The other thing I wanted to follow up on, and I think, Mayor, you had a conversation with Chuck on the 125th anniversary that you thought maybe we could help with, and I don't know whether that's what the status is of that, or if there's anything we can do to help.
We have a 125th birthday coming up, at least of incorporation, and it's March 8th, and I'm not sure that the details. I know as little or maybe even less than you may know about that, other than I think there's some check boxes over some of that. And so I think there's some opportunity. Michael, is Kelly the point on that? And it may be one of those things to possibly have Kelly and Becky come in at some point in time to say, what do you have going? And
Okay, we can follow up with them.
yeah, but that walk from the 1890s farm to downtown, who knows?
Yeah. Just a little bit about our future goals, and obviously our challenge right now is increasing the membership in the district, which will be an ongoing thing. As I mentioned, we've made initial contacts with everyone, and I think we got a lot of interest. And I think a lot of these property owners had no idea what it meant to be in the historic district. So we've made some really, I think, good headway. We just need them to get this application in. But on our work plan, we do have a work plan that also flowed out of the True Grit workshops. And on our high priority on that is to look at, and I think we've talked about with you before, identification of new landmarks in historic districts. So we'll start looking at that, and I think it might be interesting to also partner with HLI on that, since a lot of those people that are members on HLI really, really know a lot of these historic buildings. So that'll be a focus that we'll start working on. And then some medium priority that's on our work plan, promotion of the historic preservation benefits through the city website and brochures. And we have done brochures before. We'll be probably re-looking at those. How to research the history of your home and what you need to do to landmark your home, those sorts of things. And also we've talked about, for members of the district, developing a plaque that we can put on their building that kind of talks about the history of the building. So as people are walking down the street, they go by, the Coors building, and they can learn, what happened there. Just a small plaque, so that's something we'll work on. And also properties of historic significance, which was our old list of merit. Which we have a lot of properties there, and I think that's also a good source for, are there properties there that need to be landmarked? Do we need to think about that? So, and the other thing that was mentioned were alleys. Are we looking at anything in the alleys? I worked with Dennis on that, and he checked. There's nothing in the ordinance or in any design guidelines that really specifically say anything about alleys. But obviously, it's a facade. An alley could be a facade, and if that came before, the Historic Preservation Board, we would certainly act on that. And I thought maybe, and I haven't talked to the rest of the board about this, maybe a good little thing to do would be to walk the alleys of downtown and see, because to tell you the truth, I don't really know anything about the alleys. So that might be an interesting thing. If we find something interesting that might make sense, we could talk to property owners or whatever, but it's not, it would be something that would become before us if it's a facade change, I think, on a historic building. But I don't know, Mayor, if you had other thoughts on that?
This is for anyone, but I know that our session last year that Deb hosted definitely showed other cities and what they've done with regard their alleys. I was kind of struck, so
Yeah.
by that. And so I don't know if you wanted to add any.
Well, I think, I can't remember which city it was. Fort Collins. I think that if you have a layout that works for that, I know their alleys, what they did was utilize the alley as a second entrance to the store. So they made the alley entrance look as inviting as the main entrance, and then that began to create places for people to walk and then places for people to sit, and so then it kind of grew into that. So it came to mind, and there may be others, but I think that, from my knowledge at this point, Jake's new location may be the only one
They do have something.
that's using the alley for something other than trash pickup.
Right.
But there are other locations that might benefit from that too, and just could be a little bit more creative. I would say if somebody did have inclination to do something like that, it would be, how can you create that double entrance thing and double interest?
And to get people into the alley.
Because people just go through the alleys, because
Yeah.
there's really no public parking back there. And I think it's in Fort Collins, there was some public parking back. That we would have some different challenges, but it's definitely looking at, I guess.
Yeah.
Just because I've probably spent more time in the city's alleys than most.
The rest of us will refrain from comment on that, but
Vehicle traffic, it would be a code change. And right now, there are a lot of garbage pickup and things you don't want out on Main Street or on Alamo, move over to the alleys. So there'd be a lot of reworking to make that work. But I think if you looked out, 20 years in the future and you said where you want to go, I really think the alleys are a great opportunity for the city of Littleton. My kids went to school at Fort Collins, so I spent a lot of time up in the downtown area there. And of course, the presentation that Debbie had the cities come in to do, I think it was Loveland was it, that did a smaller approach to some alleys. And I think it's a great opportunity. And I think future historic look of the city will include the historical look on the alleys. So I really enthusiastically would go for that.
You guys can check, we have a CD of that presentation,
Oh, you do?
so you can get a hold, Dennis, you could help them get that. And then on that CD will be the people from those cities who did the presentations, and you could probably call them and get some more information. They were either there was mayors, council people, and urban renewal authority.
Good. Thank you, Debbie.
in the Councilmember Beckman mentioned about traffic, but I will tell you, during some of the events that happen in downtown Littleton, there are people that will pedestrian-wise travel those alleys. And you might check with Brian Vogt and John Brackney on the haunts of Littleton, because they take folks through the alleys as part of that, or did as part of that tour. So the veracity of those stories I might wonder about, given the sources on that. But it was, the pedestrian traffic side of it is one of those things where during some of the events, I mean, there were, last candlelight, I mean, there were throngs of people in the alleys going east and west. So, for sure.
Well, it just, the public safety issue kind of goes along those lines. The lighting, right now, it's the utility route for a lot of things, so it's a long-term look. But again, people are using those alleys now, as Phil said, and I just think it's a great opportunity.
It is kind of
Something to be
interesting
looked at.
to think, okay, in 20 years, do we need alleys? What could an alley look like? Because they are, even in Denver, they're removing some of them.
I think I read something in the paper recently. Was it in Golden where they have some event?
They'll bring the, was it field to table? They will have long tables and have meals cast in that. And I was mentioning earlier, there's, in some of the Denver ones, they have this guy that has this, it was funded through a grant, but it's an outdoor electronic game that gets projected on the side of a building, and it's kind of interesting, so rather than a controller.
I'm really enthusiastic about this. So I got one more thing I want to mention. In the Highline Canal Working Group that I'm on, we had the opportunity to have the architect and person that made the Highline Canal in New York City operative. If you're familiar with it, it's a heck of an accomplishment on an old railroad track. But his side point was that wasn't the only place they were doing that. They're taking alleys on the sides of buildings and turning them into open-air art areas or Sunday brunch kinds of places, or, use your imagination. So they don't have to be permanent. They can be temporary use kinds of things. And that could be transitional, or it could be the way it always is. But there's other cities doing this in small ways that maybe we could, I just think of the alley that's next to the Little Town building on Main Street. It's on the north side of Main Street there. That alley is an underutilized area. It's a perfect place to have a party, for instance. And I think we begin to think that way, we're going to see some opportunities, because they did in New York City.
Tactical urbanism. Just a term for it.
That's all we had on the agenda. Does anybody have anything to add? Anybody on the board? Or do you have anything else you'd like to discuss, or anything you would like to see us?
Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about the historic downtown, but it's not the only thing on your agenda, which is looking at the rest of the city. And Madam Chairman, you mentioned about additional landmarks and taking a look at that. But maybe folks would like to comment a little bit about what are the other areas that are being looked at in addition to the downtown?
Well, and I think the other thing that needs to be addressed too is mid-century, It only has to be 40 years old, and it's, that's catching up with us. Doesn't have to be the 1800s. So I think you're right. There's a lot of areas of Littleton to look at.
The other areas we've talked about is Littleton Boulevard, south of Main Street, and down by the mill, old mill, historic properties down in there.
And also Alamo, and we had some discussions on whether Alamo should be merged into the Main Street Historic District, or if it should be its own district. We're kind of leaning towards having it be its own district, because it is very different from Main Street. So, but we need to.
There's some challenges, because once you get outside the Main Street district, the storefront type properties, historic properties aren't storefront type properties, which you find on Main Street, so the design guidelines would be different. Kind of lends itself to, is that a different type of district?
Sister's house there, so yes, that's
Something
one that
needs
looks
to happen.
haunted right now. Very good. So in a number of things that sound like, from your incentives perspective, I would cycle that through staff to put it in a pro and con economic impact side. Anything that can be done to see that we get the appropriate share of the $5 million statewide grant program that's out there, I think would be a wonderful piece to make sure we're on the right lines for that.
Disproportionate share.
Oh, yes, disproportionate share. I wasn't going to quite put that on the recording, but go for it.
That was Bruce Stolman that said that.
Yes, I stand by the remark. I'll take all we can get.
And, certainly looking at ways that expertise can be brought to the table, whether it's using the historic Denver list or whatever, but at least my brief experience, and others can chime in on this, having someone that actually knows and will shorten their own process and possibly their own costs in doing something, at least I think that's one, so you have that kind of trade-off as goes through. So with the well-qualified architects that are around the table, I'm sure they appreciate that when someone actually comes through and does it right earlier in the process rather than later. So, Council, any other comments? Randy?
Just one thing, it's more of a compliment than anything. I haven't said anything, I didn't want you to take my silence for a lack of interest. 20-odd years ago, I was fortunate to be able to do some development on Main Street, and sort of took advantage of an early iteration of what you guys are doing now, and it was my pleasure and my honor to be able to participate in that project. And I'd like to think that some of the concepts and the precepts that you guys hold so dear will live on in those buildings and others. So thank you very much for everything that you do.
And thank you so much for your work, and we'll look forward to seeing you at least on June 26th. And so don't forget that and put that on your calendar. And when you work out your date in October for the awards, make sure we get a save the date very early.
We will.
So as far as that's concerned, so.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your work.
And thank you very much.
Adjourn.
That is it.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Here, you have lunch tomorrow.
Oh, sure.
Back to lunch.